Hi everyone, welcome into another episode of Matt Sports Talk, and in this video we are going to be looking over the updated RPI and the updated quad records. Now the updated ARC numbers will not be out until tomorrow, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. Now before we dive in, if you are brand new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button down below so you are first notified whenever I upload new episodes, and I truly appreciate any feedback that you may provide me. My goal is to hit 500 subscribers by the end of the year, so please make sure that you subscribe down below so you're first notified whenever I upload new episodes. And for those of you that are already subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. I truly appreciate that. And without further ado, we are going to dive into this video. And we had a lot of massive movements on the sides of the RPI and the quad record. Well, not really quad records, but the RPIs especially. There were a ton of movement there. So the first one we are going to look at, well, I'm going to skip over the bubble teams on the ARC, or pardon me, on the quad records. I'm going to skip over a couple of bubble teams because I want to start with the teams that would be are locked into the national tournament, no question about that. And then we are going to talk about the teams that are on the bubble last. So the teams that we're going to start with is we are going to start with Marion out of Indiana. They are 10-2 in quad 1, and they are 3-0 in quad 2. Again, they're locked into the national tournament. They're a top 5 ranked team, no question about that. So Marion for sure locked in. Not gonna talk much more, or not really gonna talk about them because again, they're locked into the national tournament. So, and again, I just wanted to start with those teams that are locked into the national tournament and then go back to talking about teams on the bubble. So the next team that is locked into the national tournament would be Spring Arbor out of Michigan. Now they are 5-4 in quad 1, which obviously isn't great. They are 4-0 in quad 2, so that definitely helps them for their resume. And for Spring Arbor, again, 5-4 in quad 1. Now they do have some really good opportunities to pick up a few more quad 1 wins. That is for sure, but again, they're locked in the national tournament, no question about that. And then St. Francis of Indiana, they are 9-2 in quad 1. They're 5-0 in quad 2, but they're locked in the national tournament, again, no question about that. What's crazy about them is that both of their quad 1 losses have both come to the Lady Wildcats of Indiana Wesleyan, so that's obviously kind of a crazy statistic to think about. So that is a look at the 3 teams that are for sure locked into the national tournament as of today, and really I don't see that changing, at least over the last, it's hard to believe, we're down to the last 3 weeks of the regular, well actually 2.5 weeks of the regular season because we're 3 weeks away from starting league tournament play. So things are really getting down to the nitty gritty. It's getting exciting, that's for sure, especially for me as a big basketball fan, as a big Indiana Wesleyan fan. Things are getting a lot more exciting, that's for sure. And then we are going to go down now, talk about teams that are on the bubble, and the first one being Taylor out of Indiana. And now they've had a rough stretch, and they've gone 2-6 in the month of January. And they are 5-0 in quad 2, so that obviously helps them in terms of being in the national tournament. But man, they're 3-6 in quad 1, like that's just, and again, they do have the opportunity to pick up some more quad 1 wins because they still have to play Huntington a second time, St. Francis a second time, and Marion a second time. So they still have the chance to pick up some quad 1 wins. Now, outside of that, now if Taylor loses all of those games to their ranked opponents, I mean, you'd be talking 16-10 overall if you lose those 4 games. And if you lose those 4 games to those opponents, you'd be looking at 3-10 in quad 1. And I don't really know if 3-10 in quad 1 will get you in to the national tournament or not. So this is a Taylor Trojan team that was looking really good to be in the national tournament, and a team that was pretty much a guarantee, but the month of January just was not very friendly to these Lady Trojans, and unfortunately they definitely are on the bubble, I think, more so now, and now they do have a really good RPI number, so that definitely helps them, but their Massey rating has dropped down in the low 40s, so that obviously is not a good sign. But again, having a really good RPI number, that helps them. Their RPI number is 31st, which is still, not too terribly bad, and they would still be in the national tournament. Remember, because if you think of the RPI, if you break it down, teams that are 0 to 35, or 1 through 35 rather, in the RPI, those teams, done deal, absolutely locked into the national tournament. If you're 36, I'd say if you're 30, well, really, if you're first to 40th, then you're pretty much locked into the national tournament, no question about that. If you are, 41st to 50th, that you would still be more than likely in, I would say firmly in, at 41 to 50, but you could drastically use some improvement. And then if you're 50th to 59th, you probably would still be in, barely in, I should say, if you're 50th to 59th in the RPI, but you really could not afford any bad losses if you are 50th to 59th in the RPI. Now, if you're 60th to 68th in the RPI, you're to the point then where you would not be getting in the national tournament unless you ran your conference tournament. So that's kind of a more detailed breakdown of the RPI numbers in terms of national tournament standing. So again, for Taylor, they would still be in, believe it or not. But again, I think right now, if I broke it down, well, I'm not going to get into breaking it down into tournament seeding because we still have 2.5 weeks of the regular season. So that's a look at Taylor. And then the next team on the bubble would be, well, not really bubble, but the next team that I think is locked in right now, no question, is Huntington. They're 23rd in the RPI, and they are 4-6 in Quad 1, so again, not too terribly bad. They are 5-0 in Quad 2, and again, the updated quad numbers came out this morning, so that's what we are going over in this video. So for Huntington, not too terribly bad. 4-6 in Quad 1, 5-0 in Quad 2 is really good numbers there. And having it being 23rd in the RPI, really good for them. 14-6 on the year, definitely locked in the national tournament, no question about that, at least as of today. And so that is a view of them. And then in terms of Marion's updated RPI, they are 6th in the updated RPI, and St. Francis out of Indiana, 5th in the updated RPI, so 5th and 6th for Marion and St. Francis respectively. Spring Arbor 17th in the updated RPI. Taylor, I alluded to them, they're 31st in the RPI, at least the new RPI that came out this morning. So that's an updated view of those teams where their RPI numbers are at. And I mentioned Huntington, they're 23rd in the RPI. And then for Bethel out of Indiana, they are 43rd in the RPI, so really not surprising here either. And they are 15-7 on the year. And again, I'm not going to go over each individual's team record. Now, again, in this video, I talk about the teams that are only the teams in the Crossroads League only, and those Crossroads League schools that are either locked into the national tournament right now / firmly in, or teams that are on the bubble. And now we get to our first bubble team, and that is Bethel out of Indiana. And again, all the teams I previously mentioned locked in the national tournament right now, no question about that, barring something crazy these last 6 games of the regular season. All 4 of those teams, Marion, St. Francis, Spring Arbor, Huntington, absolutely locked into the national tournament. And then Bethel is our first bubble team. Now they are 2-6 in Quad 1, which that obviously doesn't, they are on the bubble. Now again, being 43rd in the RPI, they would actually be in right now, but they would be firmly in, but they could really use some improvement these last 6 games to try to ensure themselves a spot. Now remember, it doesn't go solely off of that. It does not solely go off of the RPI, the quad records. It also primarily goes off of the ARC numbers in terms of your area arc, and then of course it also goes in, there's several other factors that go into that, but the quad records is definitely one of the major factors. Bethel is 5-1 in Quad 2, so that helps them, but 2-6 in Quad 1, they really need to pick up some big Quad 1 wins. Now, in their remaining schedule, they do have actually they have quite a few teams that are in the top 65 in the RPI that would classify as a Quad 1 game. For Bethel, they host number 6 St. Francis Wednesday, then they go to Huntington on Saturday, and they still have to play, and I know they're done with Taylor. So in their remaining games, in terms of teams that would classify as a Quad 1 game, would be Huntington and St. Francis on this Wednesday and this upcoming Saturday, respectively. And outside of that, Bethel does not have any more games remaining that would classify as Quad 1. So if you win those two games, if you're able to upset St. Francis on Wednesday at home and upset Huntington at Huntington on Saturday, then I think they would be pretty much locked into the national tournament if they win those two games. Now, obviously, it's going to depend on other conferences across the country, who gets an at-large bid, or an automatic bid, and is somebody going to steal a bid? We don't know. But for Bethel, they really have no room for margin of error, that is for sure. So they are definitely a bubble team, that is for sure. And then the final team I wanted to talk about, Indiana Wesleyan. And like I said, this might be a two-part video after this. Like, I'm going to try to keep this roughly about 6 or 7 minutes, and then if I have to record a separate video for another few minutes talking about them, I will do that. So, and I wanted to save the Lady Wildcats for last because, like, this is going to be a really good conversation. Now, they are 2-0 now 2-0 in Quad 2. Now, remember, the quad games, that kind of the quad games, whether it's Quad 1, 2, 3, or 4, that can kind of go either way throughout the rest of the season, especially if they played teams earlier on in the year that drop below a certain number in the RPI. Like if teams are below 65th or below 100th or below 150th, then obviously that would move over to Quad 2, 3, or 4 games. So the Wildcats previously were 2-1 in Quad 2, meaning their only Quad 2 loss was Grace. Grace now has slipped below the Quad 2 threshold into Quad 3, so that's why the Wildcats now are 2-1 in Quad 3. They're a perfect 3-0 in Quad 4, and they are now a perfect 2-0 in Quad 2, and that meaning that their games against, now because St. Thomas and College of the Ozarks are inside the top 65 in the RPI, obviously one of Indiana Wesleyan's Quad 1 losses, that was now against St. Thomas, and then their Quad 1 win now would be with the College of the Ozarks, and their other Quad 2 win, I'm not totally sure off the top of my head which other team they beat in that quad that would classify as that Quad 2 game. Now, one thing that's helped the Wildcats is these last two games, they have not, and of course I've talked about this in my daily recap video, they have not only upset Taylor and especially St. Francis back-to-back, but this is a Lady Wildcat team. They are getting red hot at the right time. And just think that 1 month ago, literally 1 month ago today, they lost at home to Spring Arbor. They were 2-3 at that point. Since then, and just in 1 month's time, since that home Spring Arbor loss where they fell to 2-3, they have gone 5-2 since then in 1 month. Now, in that stretch, their only two losses actually came after that, when they lost at home to Grace on January 10th and then lost by 40 points, so to speak, at Marion January 14th. This is a Lady Wildcat team. They have ran the table in the second half of conference play. They are 3-0 in the second half of conference play. They won up at Goshen January 24th, upset Taylor by 16 at home last Wednesday, and then upset number 6 in the country for the second time this year. Not just the first time at home back in December, but at St. Francis this past Saturday. Upset them by 2 points, 60-58. And so the Wildcats now sit at 13-9. They sit 7-5 in the conference. They have now gone above the 500 mark on the road for the first time all season, which is kind of crazy to think about. Now, yes, they did pick up some road wins earlier on in the year when they went up to Cornerstone and Aquinas. That was played at Aquinas in the mini tournament, so that might have been a neutral site. I'm not totally sure about that. But in terms of, and then at home, your only two home losses came against Spring Arbor and Grace. Your only two home losses, which the Spring Arbor home loss, really good loss. Now, yes, the Grace home loss, that was a bad one. However, now that Grace is fallen out of the threshold for a Quad 2, then that means that y'all that went to Quad 3, and the selection committee they don't really look at Quads 3 and 4. They primarily look at Quads 1 and 2. Now, when y'all beat Taylor and St. Francis back to back, both those games were quad 2 or quad 1, excuse me. 2 quad 1 wins back to back, which is amazing. And now, again, as I talked about yesterday in my daily recap video, do I think that the Lady Wildcats have done enough to make the national tournament right now? Probably not. However, now y'all have some saving grace. I will say, and I'm kind of getting into that, a little bit of a country, somewhat, and again, I did grow up in the country, or at least for I think it was a year or two back in the late 1990s. So now you're kind of seeing the little bit of country boy, or not boy, but country guy coming out of me, I should say, with y'all and stuff like that. But here's the thing for y'all, that the thing is that the last 2 wins that y'all have against very, very good teams, Taylor and St. Francis, excellent teams, both excellent teams. Both defenses are really good, both offenses are really good. So that's what makes it even more impressive, especially because of the win at St. Francis. And y'all have swept St. Francis for the first time in 2 seasons since the 2023/2024 season. Which now, was St. Francis this good at that time? Yeah, they were. They were still in the top 5, but they weren't, leading the conference at that time. So when you look at that, and again, like I've seen, I will say that y'all are the real deal. I think. I really truly do. And again, I'm not trying to focus on one team, or because the Wildcats are my favorite team. But again, I'm not trying to be biased toward any team. But I will say about this Lady Wildcats team that y'all are for real as of right now. You really are. And the way that you've been able to turn this season around, like even 1 month ago, a month ago, I'll admit to myself, like I was a little bit nervous at the time. I'm like, man, I hope y'all at least make the league tournament, even though you guys are way more talented than an 8 seed. Like, I honestly thought at that time that y'all probably would be right around that 7 or 8 spot. Like, and I'm like, okay, well, at this point, the national tournament, that's out of the running because of the early season struggles. But now, just 1 month later, y'all are getting red hot at the right time, and that's when it matters most. In fact, I remember talking to some of the assistant coaches, and grad assistant at Indiana Wesleyan, back in November after the home Goshen win, and I'm like, obviously, there's, and I told him, I'm like, there's plenty of time to turn it around, plenty of time. And I'm like, it doesn't matter most until the end of January. And what has happened as we've hit the end of January is y'all are getting red hot right now. And in fact, and I've seen just a lot more. Now, granted, the scoring, really hasn't been as consistent as what any team would want to see. But I just think that in terms of scoring, that has become way more consistent these last few games with Addie Hovey, with Ayla Krieger, and even Jade Hovey, and Emily Mattingly especially. She has come back after being out due to injury after that road Bethel game and being out the road Goshen game. Since then, she has been lights out. Like, defensively, she has just been phenomenal. And I just really think at this point in the game, in fact, and I'm going to record a separate part here in just a second, but I will say, as I wrap up part 1, that when you look at what this team has been able to do, and you compare to what Huntington did literally 1 year ago today, upsetting St. Francis at Huntington on a Gabby Melby 3-pointer in double overtime. After that, the Foresters went 5-1 in their last 6 games, and their only loss coming to Marion in that stretch. They upset, I shouldn't say upset, but beat Spring Arbor at Huntington by 21 points, which was absolutely crazy. Like, I didn't expect that at the time. And then you look at what now at Indiana Wesleyan, 1 year later, they have They're literally on, I said, you all are literally on pace to achieve what Huntington did 1 year ago. Now, do I think you all are going to win 5 out of your last 6 games? Yeah, maybe not. But if y'all are able to win 5 out of your last 6 games, let's just say the only loss coming to Marion, let's just say, like, that would just be absolutely crazy. And you look at where you are in the conference, 7-5. If you win 5 out of your last 6, you'd be 12-6 in the conference. Literally, conceivably speaking, you guys y'all I should say, would have a real legitimate chance at catching up to Spring Arbor for that number 3 seed. And if you finish tied with them, let's say at 12-6, which there are some projections that are indicating Spring Arbor will finish 12-6, y'all would hold the common opponent tiebreaker because of sweeping St. Francis, because Spring Arbor right now lost to St. Francis. They have to play them the last game of the regular season. But if Spring Arbor loses that last regular season game at St. Francis and y'all somehow get up to that number 3 spot, now I'm not saying that y'all will. It's still a tough task. Anything can happen these last 6 games. But in the event that that happens and St. Francis beats Spring Arbor the second time in the Hut, y'all would be that number 3 seed because of the common opponent tiebreaker. It's crazy to think about. Now, I'm going to record a part 2 video here in just a second, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for tuning in this video, and I will see you all momentarily. God bless.